Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt and today we're going to go through everything I've read so far in 2023. We've got 22 books covering 4 genres. We've got fantasy, sci-fi, a crime book and some non-fiction. There'll be timestamps below so you can flick into whichever books interest you most, but we'll get started because there's a lot to get through. So first off, we'll kick off with fantasy. So we'll start with a couple of books that I haven't got physical copies for, because either I borrowed them from the library or they were ebooks or audiobooks. First one I want to discuss is Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. I gave this 3.5 stars. It's, I suppose you class it as I've seen it classed as sort of a fairy tale adventure. It's full of a quest. There's a young princess, the youngest daughter of 3 daughters, whose family are the monarchs of a small kingdom surrounded by 2 much larger kingdoms. Her older sister gets married off for political reasons but dies, and then the next child gets married off, and the youngest daughter, who's our protagonist, is sent off to a nunnery when she's 15, and she stays there for 15 years while things progress outside her world. This book, though it's classed as a fairy tale, I suppose it would be more of a older school fairy tale rather than your Disney fairy tale. So there's some dark themes. There is domestic abuse within it. So it's a story of vengeance and revenge, but it has some, Kingfisher provides some fascinating imagery and ideas. So we've got things like some impossible tasks that the princess has to achieve. We have dust witches who are able to sort of control the dead. We have a goblin market. We have a weird sort of puppet god. And we have so many fairy godmothers. There's so many different elements that adds a bit of whimsy. It seems the wrong word to use when you're talking about a book containing domestic abuse within it as well. But there is humour within this book. It's incredibly well written. It's my first Kingfisher book, and I will be looking for more from the author. But it really tells a story, and the quest of this individual and the characters within it are very entertaining. And it's worth a read. I gave it 3.5 stars. My main flaw to this book was that I felt the protagonist came across as incredibly naive. And whenever sort of it mentioned that, you know, she was a 30-year-old woman, it sort of jarred with me that she was seemingly that naive. Now, I appreciate at 15 she went to a nunnery, and I suppose that's part of the reason that they put the naivety into it, but it just felt a little jarring for me in that storyline of the protagonist being 30 years old yet so naive in her outlook of how the world works. But a good read, and I will look for more from Kingfisher. Next book I want to talk about is Piranesi. Now, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke is fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a book about an individual called Piranesi who lives in this world that is so well visualised by Susanna Clarke. There's columns and towers and statues and the water, and the imagery was fantastic and beautiful, and I'm sure there's plenty of meaning that I missed that passed me by, but it was so engrossed in the world that was created, and it's written from Piranesi's point of view. So it's written as his diaries, and he's alone in this world other than one other who's known as the Other, who occasionally seems to visit. And, you know, it touches on being alone and being lonely. You know, it sparks so many thoughts, but it was the imagery for me was just beautiful. And it becomes more of a mystery at the end, or sort of, about 2/3 through it becomes more of a mystery, and we're trying to solve the mystery of how it is. It's engrossing, the storyline is fascinating, the imagery is superb, and once you've read it, I then looked up the name Piranesi itself, and it's worth doing once you've read the book. And it takes you to an individual, and you'll see their drawings, and their drawings are obviously the inspiration for the world in which Piranesi is set, and it is worth exploring that as well, because it just added something to me to see the drawings that this individual had created, you know, a few hundred years ago. So yeah, 5 stars for me. This was an exceptional read. I'd recommend it to anyone to try and read it if you like sort of magical realism. If the language is simple, but there's a lot of meaning within it, and it deals with some very interesting subjects as well. So I think it's well worth a read and worth the hype that it's been getting. So that was the 2 that I haven't got physical copies for. The next one is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I enjoyed this book. I know it's got a lot of hype. I think it's certainly been nominated for awards, if not won them. It's about an individual, a lady who effectively commits suicide and goes to the Midnight Library. And this is a place where there's basically a book of her life for every decision she could have made differently. And it's a fascinating idea that you could be somewhere and alter your past decisions to enter a future life. And it's just mesmerising. It gave me a lot of feelings of, maybe because I read it in January, but of It's a Wonderful Life, the Christmas movie. It gave me a lot of vibes of that. And I think Matt Haig is probably inspired by that story as well. But it was fascinating. I think I gave this, what did I give this, 4 stars? Yeah, 4 stars I think I gave this one. So, it's fascinating. It became very obvious what was going to happen in the end, because there was a message to be told. And it did become, I suppose, a little preachy in that sense. But it was interesting to see, decisions you made previously and the impact it can have on your life. And I like that you entered the life with the knowledge you had currently. You didn't know where you were going, etc. It was good. The other bit I liked of this edition is the cover, the hardcover. When you take the sleeve off, and if you've read the book, you'll know why. It's a nice touch. It's absolutely minimalist. There's nothing on it. It's just green. But if you read the book, you'll understand why I appreciate that little touch. So that was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Right, next on the fantasy side, I started reading some more of my favourite author, or one of my favourite authors, Terry Pratchett, and his Discworld novels. I started this year. I decided to reread. So I've probably read about half of them. I've got some up there. There's 40 odd novels in the Discworld series. At the beginning of the year, I started rereading them. I started to take the Rincewind track. So I've read the first 4 in that. There's 8 in the Rincewind elements of books. So you've got The Colour of Magic, The Light Fantastic. Oh, let's not drop them. Sourcery, and Eric, or Faust Eric. I love Discworld novels. Terry Pratchett, to me, is a genius. His ability to use language and satire and humour to make points of civilization, society, religion, authority. It is mesmerising. It makes me laugh out loud when I read places. I'll probably say Rincewind is probably the weakest of the trends of books within the series, possibly. Eventually, you've got Rincewind, who's a failed wizard, but still a wizard, for reasons that become clearer, who ends up on numerous adventures that he doesn't want to be on, and spends his life trying to run away from trouble and responsibility and anything that comes his way. The first 2 are probably my favourite. The Colour of Magic and Light Fantastic. They are effectively a duology, I suppose. They follow straight on. They got Rincewind, who's, as I said, the fair wizard, but also Twoflower, who is the first tourist this world has ever known. And there's some brilliant quotes in here. I could wax lyrical about Discworld and Pratchett and these books for way too long and bore you silly, and that's probably another video on Discworld. But so for me, I think I gave these 2 5 stars. Sourcery is around the 8th son of the 8th son of the 8th son of an 8th son is a wizard. However, the 8th son of that, or a wizard squared, is a sorcerer. And a sorcerer is a source of magic and brings magic into the world, and the chaos that ensues with the magic. The imagery that and the world that he creates is just, it's unbelievable. Anyway, I enjoyed this. The problem with the Rincewind, I think the problem with the Rincewind novels is they become a little samey. And Rincewind as a protagonist is funny, but he doesn't necessarily take authority or make decisions of his own life. And as a protagonist, that can be a little frustrating, I suppose. But anyway, so I think this one was it 3.5, 4 stars, something like that. Maybe 3.5 for this one. And then Faust Eric, much shorter one. This is a shorter one. It was an illustrated novel, I think, first of all. It's Rincewind is summoned by someone trying to summon a demon, a young boy effectively trying to summon a demon, and it's their travel through basically hell and what hell is. And I really appreciate the view of hell as almost like an office based on efficiency and driving efficiency, and having come from or worked in sort of corporate enterprise where efficiency was the main driver. There was some fascinating and humorous insights from that. It's good. For me, it's a bit too short. It doesn't really delve into enough detail. Again, it was made as an illustrated edition, which kind of makes sense as to why it doesn't delve into that level of detail. I think I gave this 3.5. 3.5? Yeah, I think 3.5 as well. So far so good. I'm currently reading Interesting Times, which is the 5th of 8 in the Rincewind. So you'll have an update in my April update. So there's those 4. Talking about magical worlds. Next one I read was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So I have a confession. I've never read Harry Potter. I started reading it last year. I read the first 2, which you all know. The Philosopher's Stone. Yes, the Philosopher's Stone, because I am British rather than the Sorcerer's Stone. And the second one is the Chamber of Secrets. So Harry Potter sort of passed me by when it first came out. I wasn't that interested in it. Didn't read it. I've only picked it up now. So far, if I'm brutally honest, it's fine. I can see if I was much younger reading it, I would probably be much more impressed. The way J.K. Rowling sort of builds the characters as the children. They are really children, and you feel that they're really children, and the magical realism of it is endearing. And there's some really good characters in there. I preferred the recent one I read, The Prisoner of Azkaban. I say recent one, The Prisoner of Azkaban. It was a bit darker, a bit more sinister. I've got the next one, but what I'm going to do is I requested the audiobook from the library because I think it's read by Stephen Fry, who I'm a big fan of as well. So we'll see how that goes. But I think I'll probably listen to it via audiobook, especially as it's quite a tome. They get suddenly quite chunky going onwards. So I'll probably listen to it as audiobook and we'll see what it is. But it seems to be getting darker, so we'll see how that goes. But it's good. It's not great, in my opinion, reading it now as a much older individual. Okay, so that was a fantasy. I'm talking about, obviously, got Sirius Black. In this one, I'm talking about Sirius. We move on to another Sirius and into our sci-fi. And we've got Sirius by Olaf Stapledon. This book is about a genetically modified dog with the intelligence of a human. It's really good. It's actually really good. So it explores what is written as a biography of the dog, and it explores the dog's experience of being a canine with human level intelligence, being raised within a family, and it goes into experiences of nature and nurture. Is he dog? Is he going back to his roots as a wolf? Is he a man? What is he? Who am I? That question I think we all ask. It touches on religion. It touches on loneliness. He's the only one of his kind. Really in the world, there are other dogs of intelligence, but nothing even approaching his level of intelligence. It goes on the disconnect of having a human level of intelligence being brought up in a human family, but the world around you being built for humans and you not being in a human form. And how would you cope with that? How would you survive? How do you build relationships with anyone, with anything? Who do you build relationships with? Do you build it with dogs who are just nowhere near your intelligence level and you can't really communicate with, but you have a natural attraction to, a physical attraction to? Or do you build a relationship with humans, but do they really accept you as human because you are, at the end of the day, a dog? It was a really interesting insight into what it would be like potentially for a dog in that world, and it's worth a read. It's not particularly long. It's just under 200 pages. Yeah, I enjoyed this one. I think I gave it four stars. Yeah, 4 stars. It was an interesting exploration of that. And talking about genetically modified beings, we move on to Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton.
It's Jurassic Park, it's a massive park. What could possibly go wrong?
I have put off reading this for so long. It's silly, really. And I put it off because I watched the film when I was younger, and I adore the film. The original Jurassic Park is one of the best films, and it had such an impact on. I was young, obviously dinosaurs. It was unbelievable, the special effects of the time. And I was really worried about reading this because I was worried it was going to be too much like the film. So I put it off for years and years. It sat on my shelf, and that was a mistake. It is an excellent read, and it's different enough from the film. It's significantly different from the film. Obviously, there's a park for dinosaurs, and people go there, and a lot of the characters do exist, but there's enough difference between the characters and the relationships the characters have to make the story interesting. Things that happen here don't happen in the film, and vice versa. It's also one of the only books I know that has, I don't know if you want to see, has graphs, and finally it's got tables of data. It's got like DNA codes. It's got code written. It's the only sci-fi book I've come across that has that kind of tables. So if you know any more, I'd be interested to know. But that was an aside. The action in this book is really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's pretty much a romp from start to finish. The only thing I would say there's not really any character development in this book. In fact, I would say the film has better character development than the book, which probably says something. But really fun read. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Glad I actually got round to it, and would recommend. Even if you've watched the film, enjoyed the film, it's different enough to be entertaining and enjoyable. So that was Jurassic Park. Right. Again, continuing on the genetically modified theme, I've got a few audiobooks that I've been through, mainly in the Warhammer 40k universe. If you don't know what Warhammer 40k is, it's a tabletop miniature game, wargaming. The thing I love about the Warhammer 40k universe is it is massive. I don't think there's a bigger, I was going to say world building in sci-fi or fantasy, but it's not really world building, it's galaxy building. It is enormous. There's probably hundreds of books now. No, there are hundreds of books now set in that universe. But the books I've listened to most recently are some of the Horus Heresy element of books, and especially the last few of the Siege of Terra. So what this is you've got the Emperor of Mankind, who's worshipped as a godlike being, and then he created in a lab effectively 20 sons of supernatural ability, and then below them they've got a host of genetically modified super warriors known as Space Marines. And effectively half the sons have rebelled against the Emperor, and there's a massive fight going on, and now the heretics, as they're known, are now approaching Earth, and it's coming to us a final battle. If you like massive battles, fight scenes, action, non-stop action, then this is quite a good series. If you want something deeper than that, I find it disappoints. For for a universe that is so dark, or could be so dark, and so grim, it never really delves enough into it for me. It always seems quite surface level. Yes, there's violence, but it never really delves into, especially the Horus, it delves into the human experience of it. It's all from these superhuman beings, and you get detached. And there's also a lot of lulls and then sudden massive explosions of energy and activity, and then huge lulls. And I think they've dragged out the series. It's 8, 9 books now. So the books I've read are, I listened to Saturnine by Dan Abnett, Mortis by John French, Warhawk by Chris Raitt, and Echoes of Eternity by Aaron Dembski Bowden. Of those, Saturnine was probably the best. I think I gave that 4 stars. The others were all sort of 3-ish, 3 stars. They were fine. Would I have continued the series if I was actually reading it physically? No, I don't think I would have done. I'm listening to an audiobook, and Jonathan Keeble is the narrator, and he is fantastic. One of the best voice actors for audiobooks that I've come across. He is exceptional. The voices he does, the atmosphere he supplies to the story is exceptional, and I think that's why I've kept on with it. I think if I'd been reading it physically, I think I'd have given up on the series, but with his voice and his intonations and the way he tells the story, I know he's just reading it, but it adds another layer, and I'm engaged within it. I thought there was one more book to come out, but they're split into 2 volumes, and this is what I say about them dragging it out. It's getting too long, but there's 2 volumes. One's out already, one's coming out. I'm going to put it off until the second one comes out, and then I'll probably just binge them together and just finish it and have done with it. The interesting thing about it is that as a 40k fan, we know the ending, so we know how it ends. We just don't know the precise details of how we get there, and there's loads of storylines built into this that, man, I just hope they pay off in the end. There's a whole perpetual storyline that I really, at the moment, don't care about, and I'm really hoping it has a big payoff in the end. So perpetuals are people who basically can't die, but it's just not building into the story. And there's lots of little side stories, and it's whether they all link at the end to create a satisfying conclusion. We will see, but that's probably a little while away. I think it's probably due out this year at some point, but that's way off. But yeah, Jonathan Keeble though, unbelievable. I've also listened to another set of 40k books, which is the Ravenor trilogy. So Ravenor is an Inquisitor, so he works for the Inquisition.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Which is basically the secret police of the Emperor, the God Emperor of mankind as he's known. And they have absolute authority. And again, what I like about this is it's more based on humans and what humans are doing, rather than superhuman beings. Don't get me wrong, they are incredibly skilled, but at least they're more human, and you see more worlds, and the world building is really good. You get to go to like these hive cities that are grim. They've got millions or billions of people living in cramped conditions, unsanitary conditions. They discuss drug abuse and things like that, but they never go into the real. It never grits me by the stomach and makes me feel it enough for me to love it as much as it could be. It could be so much grimmer and so much darker. And I assume they're aiming at an audience that doesn't want that per se, but there's so much. You've got an Inquisition which has ultimate power of life and death over everyone. That should be a really dark story, and it's not as dark as it should be. I'm going to say it. Also, the big issue I have with this is the main leader, Ravenor himself, is a bit of an idiot. He's not, for someone who is in a position of great authority and power and has got there by merit, he comes across as pretty ignorant, pretty silly, pretty unintelligent, doesn't think things through, isn't suspicious enough of activities and things for a member of the Inquisition. You expect them to be much more suspicious of what's going on in their surroundings and what's going around them, but he's not. Anyway, it started off strong, 4 stars. Last one was probably 2.5, 3, but it's done now. if you want to get into the 40k reading and that universe, there's better books. Don't read these. There's other books. Maybe I'll do a video on that, other books to start off with, because the world and the universe building itself is remarkable, and I don't think there's anything like it in literature that I've come across. But please let me know if there is. Okay, so that leaves, one left on the sci-fi, which is Far From the Light of Heaven by, is it Tade Thompson? Tade Thompson? This could have been so good. It started really well. My problem, so this is a story. It is effectively a locked room mystery in space. So you've got the main protagonist, who's called Campion, and she's out on a mission. And again, you've got space travel, so it's many years later. So she was woken up, and there's effectively been a murder or murders on the ship, and she's the only one awake at the time, and it should be more tense than it is. There's so many good ideas in this book. It never quite fulfills its promise. It's got aliens, it's got space travel, it's got artificial intelligence, it's got colonies and colonists, and the abuse of power and the power of money and influence. It's got so many ideas. It just never explores, for me, it never explores any of them far enough. And it's almost like there's too many things happening. There's too many people involved. There's too many ideas thrown in, and the book's not long enough to cope with it. And therefore, it doesn't build the suspense because there's too many things happening. And I think that's the big thing. This could either take some ideas out and build upon them further. I would love to see, especially the colonist angle, and that angle built further. But there's so many good angles they could have built further. Or if you're not taking this out, it needs to be longer. It's 300 pages, 350 pages. It needed to be longer if you wanted to explore the number of ideas that he had. And the ideas are amazing. They are fascinating, but there's not enough space in the book to explore them and redevelop them, which is disappointing. So I think I gave it 3 stars, 2.5 stars. Such a disappointment. It could have been excellent. It just tried to get too much in too little space. And talking about effectively what is a crime in sci-fi, let's go to crime in the real world, or another fictional world, but based in the world. Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club, the first of his series. This was great. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I suppose it's a cozy crime novel. It's about a group of septuagenarians, in an old people's retirement community, and their love of life and also their love of investigating death. I suppose there's murder that happens within their circle of community, and they set about investigating it, and it's their involvement within it, their exploration of it. It's the relationships between them. And what I love about this book is, one, it's got older protagonists, which is fun to see, but they're developed well, and they actually feel like real older people, and some of the conversations they have feel like really older people having conversations. And it's fun, and I want to be part of the Thursday Murder Club. They're a great bunch. It's, as I say, it's quite cozy in its crime and its drama. There was 2 bits that got to me. There was one where we had a perspective from one of the suspects that suddenly jumped in, and it felt jarring. It felt unnatural. I didn't know why we suddenly jumped to their perspective, and that just threw me out a little bit. It was a minor point, but it just threw the flow off, because mainly you see it from their point of view, the septuagenarians' point of view, especially one called Joyce, who's the main viewpoint of it. But there was a bit where we got, as I say, one of the key suspects' viewpoints, and it just threw me out a little bit as we jumped chapters. The other point is that just got me is that towards the end it felt like we were throwing suspicion at everybody and anybody, and deliberately just throwing suspicion around. And the ending was fine. It wasn't the greatest. It was fine. I still have questions over why people did what they did, considering, but it was fine. It was good. It was enjoyable. I will be reading the next one. I think I've got the next one somewhere down here, which is The Man Who Died Twice. So the next one, The Man Who Died Twice. So I'll probably be picking that up in the next month or two. It was thoroughly enjoyable. The characters were great. The story was good. There was just a few minor points that threw me off. I think I gave it 4 stars. 4 stars? I think it was 4 stars. Yeah, 4 stars. So that's all the fiction. So now we'll move on to the non-fiction. And we've got 3 non-fiction books. Let's start with the one that I didn't enjoy as much. And that was Labrador by Ben Fogle. Now, I am a big dog fan. I own a Labrador, black Labrador, like that as well. And I was really hopeful for this book. It's the story of the world's favourite dog is the tagline. So I was expecting it to be all about where the breed comes from, and about the how amazing dogs are. And it has got that. It goes into where the Labrador breed came from, and how it developed and how it survived over many generations. And that is interesting. It also goes into the incredible stuff these dogs can do, the capabilities of them, the jobs they fulfill, the tasks they can conduct so much better than humans or even machines in places. And it's got all that, and that's really good. What really bugged me about this book is that it had a lot of anecdotes about Ben Fogle and his life, and I really didn't care. I was only there for the dogs. I didn't care about Ben Fogle and his anecdotes in his life, and they bugged me and they got in the way. So 3 stars for that. But if you like dogs, it's okay. If you like Ben Fogle and dogs, excellent read. After the disappointment of Ben Fogle, we have 2 more, which I did thoroughly enjoy. So the first one we'll talk about is The Invention of Nature. The Adventures of Alexander von Humboldt, the Lost Hero of Science by Andrea Wolf. Now, I don't read many biographies. I haven't read many biographies. This won the 2015 Costa Biography Award. And it's been on my shelf for a couple of years now. This was fascinating. Alexander von Humboldt, how I'd never heard of him, I have no idea. I mean, I'm quite interested in life and science and that. I've read Charles Dickens' On the Origin of Species, which this certainly influenced those ideas. So it's about an individual who lived, a Prussian individual. He lived around sort of Napoleon's time, and the Napoleonic Wars are part of it, the French Revolution, American independence. You've then got, so you get all that as well. But the way that Andrea tells us is it's a really interesting, starts with a really interesting adventure story. He goes out exploring in South America, and that's where he starts to formulate his ideas about nature being a whole across the world and being a whole, and that is really fascinating. But also the influence he has on society almost around the world. I mean, you've got the influence he has, and this is what I like about the way Andrea Wolf has done this, is that you go into his influence on others. So you've got his collecting ideas in there, and then he goes around, traveling around Europe and things like that. But his influence on things like people like Simon Bolivar, who's the, I suppose, initially revolutionist in South America and then became dictator. You've got his influence on Charles Darwin, which I've already mentioned. You've got his influence on Henry David Thoreau. You've got his influence on so many people in this. And what I love is not only is it his life, but it's his influence after his death as well as during his life on all these other people as well. And it was really fascinating. It really was. And I was surprised at how quickly I managed to read through this. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, I think it was. But it was fascinating. A fascinating read. If you're interested in nature and our ideas of nature as a sort of conducive whole, and you've not heard of Alexander von Humboldt, who I've never heard of before in my life, I suppose there's more things named after him, more animals and breeds and nature, plants named after him than anybody else in the world. But I'd never heard of him. And if you haven't heard of him, and you're interested in that things, pick it up. It's really good. I think she has written a couple of other books. I think she's written one about Chasing Venus, I think it's called, where we had scientists around the world looking at Venus transit across the sun, which I'd be interested in reading. And finally, the 22nd book on this list, unless I've missed some, another non-fiction, East-West Street by Philippe Sands, which won the Bailey Gifford Prize. This was an exceptional read. So it's... Philippe Sands is a lawyer, and the book is about... So it's about World War II, it's about the Holocaust, but really it's about the creation of the laws of crimes against humanity and genocide, and what they mean, where they came from, the people that created them. So you've got Lemkin and Lauterpacht, I'm probably pronouncing them wrong, each came up with them individually, or they each came up with one individually, and the battle between crimes against humanity, which is about the individual, and genocide, which is about the group. And what this book did is it got me to really think about whether it's individual or group, and what's more important, or are they equally important, and can they be maintained cohesively together, or do you need one or the other? It talks about the change from nations being all powerful over their own citizens to individuals having rights within their nations. And it's all threaded through with his own family. So his family's experience within it as well. So it follows several individuals. I would say Lemkin, Lauterpacht. There's Leon, who's Philip Sands. Philip Sands' relation. It's all there. It's also got stories of incredible bravery. There's is it Miss Tilney? Who effectively is going into Germany and rescuing babies from the Nazis. It's got, not only has it got this legal history element, but it's told through human stories, and it's all linked nicely. And it also links around the town of, or is it a city or town of Lviv in what is Ukraine, and the way that has changed hands so many times leading up to this and since, and obviously with the Russian invasion of Ukraine at the moment, it gave a bit of focus to my mind as I was reading through this about what's going on. But it was really fascinating just reading about where these laws come from, and also the disconnect between them, and the battle to actually get them both into the Nuremberg trials, and the thoughts of the British, the Americans, the Russians, and the French, who sat on the judges of Nuremberg, and what they wanted to focus on. It just, but the main thing to take away from this for me is the difference between the individual and the group, and what is more important, and what do we need to protect, and can you protect both at the same time, or are they antagonistic towards each other? And if you put the group first, does that create more division than putting the individual first? It really made me think. It's a really interesting book. It's fascinating read. It's very well written. It's relatively short chapters, most of it, so it's quite easy to sort of pick up and put down. The stories, there's plenty of human stories within that. The connections between these individuals are fascinating. It also covers off Hans Frank, the German Nazi who basically ran Poland during the war when they were in charge as well, because he was obviously tried at Nuremberg. It is, I would recommend it. It is a brilliant read. I give it 5 stars. It's really left me thinking. I'm still thinking about it now. I think I'll be thinking about it for a long time. So, excellent. 5 stars for that one. So that is it. 22 books so far in the first 3 months of the year. It's been a really good reading time so far. Most of them have been 4 stars. A couple of 3, 2.5 3s. A couple of 5s. If there's any books there that you look forward to reading, then let me know. If there's any books that you'd recommend based on what I've read and enjoyed, I'll be really interested to hear that as well. But thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon. Okay, bye.